Hello, I am William Jamar Wright,
And I'm Hattie.
and this is our podcast, HattieJo. What are we doing? And this month, the month of July, we're getting ready for our wedding. We are officially 4 weeks out, so a month away.
I know, literally, it's a Saturday night right now. 4 Saturdays from now, at this time, we will be married.
Yeah, we'll be married and probably sleeping.
Yeah, it's right. It's a little late right now. We'll be on East Coast time, so
yeah. So we are definitely excited. And then I think it's an interesting thing to do is like married as a future married couple, just to hear like what other people like advice other people have. That's something that I actually think is like, as a society, we could do a better job of like taking and giving advice and listening.
Yeah, I think society does a great job of giving advice. The listening part may not be so good, but
So we are going in the spirit of giving and listening to advice. We, of course, I asked you guys to post and on our Facebook page and give us some advice, as well as, so we're going to talk about some of the advice you guys have given us, and just kind of bounce, kind of talk about that advice for a little bit, and then we'll share some of the advice we've gotten from different people, whether we've been out or things like that.
And also, I just wanted to point out, at my bridal shower, I also asked people to, Sarah did, my sister-in-law who threw me the shower, did a great job. I asked people to give advice, and I got this nice little album that holds it. So we had a lot of different advice givers, and we kind of seeked out advice in different ways. Also on my bachelorette, as I was wearing a veil the whole day, from the hot air balloon to the hike to the tour to everything, dinner. Anytime we'd meet, it was mostly on the hike that people were friendly and everything, but anytime we'd run into somebody and they'd be like, "Oh, congratulations," I'd be like, "Oh, do you have any advice?" So we got a lot of really cool stuff. So anyway,
Nice.
Yeah.
So we'll get started here. We'll start by kind of going over some of the different like themes. So we won't say word for word the advice people said, but just kind of themes. So the first one is be yourself. This came from Oscar Dantzler, who's a good friend from Duke University. So it's funny, be yourself. I don't really know any other way to be. So I hope that I will be myself. But I do think that like sometimes, like I've heard of people talking about like be yourself, and like sometimes you do things that you shouldn't do to get people to like you. And then you get in marriage and you're like, oh, I don't need to do those things anymore because they like me now. I got them. And then like you show your true self.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about that with me. I am not going to be out here changing. So you've seen me. Hopefully you like me for what you got, because
that's funny.
I ain't changing.
Well, I think that kind of segues really nicely. It's a different spot on the list, but it segues really nicely into one of my best friends, Jen Tracy. Her advice was actually a piece of advice that her uncle had given her at their wedding. Mm-hmm. And he, works in the church, so he was actually giving part of the service. And in that service, he talked about the changeling. And it was this big, long story, but really the moral was kind of, as you go through your life, you grow and change. And one day you're going to wake up in the morning and the person you married is not going to be there anymore. That, the person laying next to you is a whole new person because they've grown and changed, right? Even though it's the same individual.
Yeah.
And so her like kind of moral there was to embrace that change, which I think makes sense. Like, you have to be authentically you, and you can grow and change, but that's very different than being non-authentically.
Yeah.
Like, not that you're trying to be deceitful and deceiving, but you don't want to be like deceiving about who you are. Like, be upfront and honest with who you are, and then as who you are grows and changes, that person has the ability to accept you and love you for who you are, because you're
Yeah.
not like pretending to be something you're not.
Well, that's a good point too. And you think about like, I think about embrace the change. Like, the person I was at 25 is definitely not the person that I am now. And that like I've changed and I've grown over that time period. And I think that like I would still say like I wouldn't make the same decisions that I would make at 25, but I hope that kind of like my core essence is still the same. But I would definitely say that I've changed. So I hope that like, I think that we will do a good job of embracing the change and like seeing the growth in each other. But I hope that like the core essence of who we are and kind of like some of our like core beliefs, I would hope that they don't change.
Yeah.
But like I do understand that like we're both gonna grow and we're not gonna be the same person today that we are down the road.
Well, and I also understand that like you might change, but I don't have any control over it. Like, I'm not gonna be out here changing you to be something like, you know, any change that you're gonna undergo is fully gonna be coming from you, right? Because there's not a thing I can really do. And it's not independent to you. That's more just in the healthy relationship I feel that we've cultivated is like we're both accepting of each other as they are, and I'm not trying to make you be someone you're not. But anyway.
So the next piece of advice that we're going to talk about comes from Casey King. She was my academic coordinator while I was a student athlete at Duke, and we formed a great like friendship. And I definitely would take her advice. But her advice is actually for us to have separate comforters, which like definitely like every relationship is different, and so you gotta like do what's best for your relationship. I don't think that will work for us. And just because like you just you love to cuddle and be close.
I do love to cuddle you, yeah. It'd be a little tough to have like the lines split down the middle, but that's funny because one of the people I was talking to on the plane today, so I came back from my final wedding dress fitting, and so I was on the plane earlier today and was chatting, and I got another piece of it. This guy was a piece of work. He was funny, but one of the pieces of advice he gave us, he's like, he said, you need 2 bathrooms and 2 computers. Everything else can be shared. So I feel like Casey would add comforters to that list.
So the next piece of advice that we got, this came from Andrea Howard, Marquise Camp, Claudia Emanuel, and then a bachelorette party person that they ran into.
Yeah, so one of the people when I was on my bachelorette party.
Be each other's best friend. And I think we do a very good job of definitely being there for each other. And it's weird, like I've definitely one of my favorite R&B songs, and it's like the chorus goes, and if I ever fall in love again, I will be sure that the lady's a friend.
Yeah.
And so like,
Usher.
It's not Usher?
It's not Usher?
I don't think that's Usher. That's definitely not Usher. It's not Usher. I know it's not Usher.
Dang, here I was hoping I got my own little Usher. No, I'm kidding.
But basically it talks about like when you fall in love with somebody, like love is difficult and hard, and like you need to be friends. And I think we are pretty friends. Like we enjoy a lot of I don't know if we enjoy like a lot of the same things, but we take trips together.
We enjoy enough of the same things, but also have our own things. I think it's good. Like, it's not like literally every single thing we do in life is together.
Shared, yeah.
But I do think we have a very substantial portion of things that are shared. Because it's also not like literally everything we do is separate other than exist in the same house, right? But it's actually, that piece of advice I think is really good. I mean, I do think you're absolutely right. You need to have a foundation of friendship. But one observation that I've made is a lot of people will be posting like, oh, I get to marry my best friend, or oh, I'm so excited to marry my best friend. And I've never really felt like you're my best friend. I felt like it's a level above that I didn't even know existed until I was in this relationship. Because I feel like you are a best friend, but also so much more.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to me, best friend is just not quite the right labeling, even though there is that aspect to our relationship. There's just more, like, it's just one dimension, right? So, like, that labeling has always been a little odd to me, but I don't think it's wrong. I mean, everyone gets to label their own relationships however they want, but, like, for me personally, I feel like it is only encapsulating part of the relationship as opposed to the whole.
That's a good point. Like, it definitely, like, there's definitely like
there's more to it.
There's definitely more to it than just being like best friends.
But that's a certain, like, I definitely think that's a good necessary thing. So
good
thank
point.
you for that.
So the next one, I'll let you read this.
Okay, so this one was mentioned by several people: Suzanne Bull, Andrew Ford, and Katie Lyon. They all had some take on the concept of continue to date each other. And I think kind of that goes really well to that best friend thing we just talked about. Like, you don't really date your best friend, but you do want to date the person that you're marrying, similar to when you were dating, right? Like, you want to continue to have those moments of intimacy and moments of time spent together, and like taking a time out to focus on the romance instead of just all the house repairs or like all the kids stuff, you know, like taking some time to rekindle the flame or just pay attention to that component of the relationship, because again, it is such a multi-dimensional relationship, and each, like, they're your teammate, they're your partner, and like you're spending a lot of time in that way, or they're your helper with the kid, you know, like you also have to pay attention and invest in that bank account of, so I think that's really good advice.
Yeah, that is really good advice, and it like allows you to kind of like, it allows you to take time to like focus just completely on the relationship. Like, when you're dating somebody, like, you're not thinking about like all the million other things that are going on. Like, you can go to dinner, have like a good conversation, or like whatever you choose to do on your date, like that can, your relationship and that can be the main focus of the evening.
Right.
So thank you guys very much for that.
Yeah.
So the next one is keep our business to ourselves. So don't be out here talking in the streets, letting everybody know what's going on between you and I. And this one was given by some family members of mine, Catherine Sexton and Brenda Wright. So we definitely appreciate that. And I'm definitely a very more like
You're a
private person.
Yeah.
Definitely do not prefer to have my business out in the streets. So it is definitely something that, like, it is good advice. And I think, like, going along with that advice, it's like we need to be communicating and talking with each other as opposed to like going outside of our relationship to like talk to other people or like share things. It's definitely good to like communicate with each other, but just not like, there's some people that may not have the best intentions for us.
True.
So, and like sharing information with them could give them ammo or fuel to like try and drive a rift through our relationship.
Right, or just, you know, I feel like it shows a level of respect, kind of like you talked about before. Like, it's one thing if you're like, I'm really concerned, I have this issue, like I'm talking to my best friend and we're having a private conversation. Like, to me, that's different than like blasting somebody on social media, right? But like, the point is, at the end of the day, nothing's gonna get better in the relationship if I don't talk to you, right? And so you know, whatever else is going on, all that noise out there, at the end of the day, like, it's you and me in this together.
Yeah.
And so I need to go to the source, or like this, you know, all that out there isn't going to fix what's in here. So, ooh, that was close. Her tail almost. Let's just roll that. Okay.
So the next one is
Someone wants to be a star on our podcast.
Discuss division of labor.
Division.
Discuss.
Sorry, I thought you said the vision. I might have heard you wrong. Sorry about that.
Discuss division of labor. Communicate and communicate how you feel. Say how you feel.
Yeah.
So this was given to us by Rachel Ellen, Reggie Mallory, Courtney Hunter, and a bachelorette person.
Yeah, random. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that kind of goes back to what we were talking about in the keep our business to ourselves. It kind of turned into a, like, fix our business by communicating through our business, you know, and I think that's really important. One thing Courtney said was, you know, people aren't mind readers. And that's so true. I think a lot of people, myself included, have a tendency to be like, I see the world this way. How, like, it's hard to imagine somebody else seeing it a different way. So if they're doing X, it must mean Y. And that's bothering me or making me upset or whatever. But it's like, most of the time, they don't have any intention behind that. That's just a thing that they're doing that doesn't even cross their mind. And it certainly isn't intending to have this
negative consequence.
Yeah, right? So, like, you have to just speak up about it. And 9 times out of 10, it's like a non-problem.
Yeah.
But you can't expect them to know that. Like, just because you see it one way does not at all mean they see it that way or they intend it that way. Like, that's something I worry about a lot, but at least at the beginning of our relationship, like, we've talked on the podcast before about I like things very tidy, and I wouldn't say that you're like a ridiculous mess, but you're less tidy than I am. And I have a tendency to, like, when things are messy, to clean it up. And it's not in any way that I'm trying to passive aggressively be like, oh, I'm gonna stamp in here and in front of him while he's doing this stuff, like, put stuff away. Like, yeah, that's not at all what I'm just like, I like it cleaner, so I'm going to tidy it up. But there was a period of time that I would worry, like, God, I really hope he's not taking this as, like, me being passive aggressive, like, you know, like, trying to show that I'm upset with him or, like, make him feel bad for not tight. Like, that's not at all where it's coming from. But I can see in some scenarios in other relationships that might actually be what the motivation is, right? And so I could easily see that my actions might be being read in a way that it's not at all what I'm intending them to be. But I also feel like we communicated pretty well. You were pretty... I never felt that you were taking it that way, but I felt that there's a potential you could take it that way.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see, like, as, like, our relationship continues to grow and we have kids or, like, a house and things like that, and kind of, like, with our work schedules, like, how the division of labor kind of gets, like, worked out, because it definitely has to be communicated. And I would hope that we, like, kind of share it, like, the division of labor, and that, like, neither one of us feels like we're being overwhelmed or, like, taking on too much. I definitely felt like there was a time in our relationship where, like, you were definitely doing a lot.
I know what time you're talking about, yeah.
And, like, I didn't think anything of it. I just thought, like, hey, you just want to do it, and, like, there's no issues. Like, I didn't have any issue with letting you do it. And so, like, you, like, one night you just said, hey.
I communicated that I did have issues with me doing it all, and I needed some help.
Yeah.
And then after that, I got lots of help.
Yeah.
It was great.
And so, like, it definitely, I think, the communication and just having open conversations about, like, what needs to be done and who's gonna do it, and, like, how, like, one can help the other is definitely good to, like, check in and see how things are going.
Right. And I think also something that's important on that is there's going to be ebbs and flows, right? And you kind of got to support each other. Like, let's say it's a year where, let's say things don't go to plan and we have kids before I've passed the PE, and I'm like, I really need to pass this major milestone. That might mean that for 6 months, the division of labor is much more heavily on you in terms of things around the house because I'm trying to do something else, right? But that's a thing that we need to consciously communicate, and you need to be as invested as I am that this is a good use of time, right? Because you're supporting me in me achieving my goals. And likewise, there might be a couple years down the road, you're like, I really want to do this coaching thing, or I really want to do this other thing, which would take you away from having time to do a lot of these other things. And now I'm doing more of that, right? But it's like, we've made a choice that that's worth it.
Yeah.
And so the division of labor may not always be exactly equal, and probably won't be exactly equal, right? But like, as long as both people are aware and conscious, and it's like, she's making this sacrifice so that I can work on this thing, or I'm making this sacrifice to work on this thing and they're supporting me and doing, you know, like, as long as both people feel like their efforts are being acknowledged and appreciated, I think that also goes a long way. But it certainly needs to be communicated. Like, it's not like I'm going to be working 80 hours a week all the time and just assume you're going to take care of everything. Like, that's not cool in any way, right? Like, you need to talk that through and make sure that both people are on board. So, great suggestions.
So I'll let you read the next one.
Okay, so the next one is to have a good sense of humor and to remember to laugh a lot. And so this one comes from Matt Kane, Joyce Schmidt, and Kim Lyon, my Aunt Kim, which Aunt Kim and Uncle Mark are always laughing. Like, I love that. So I think that also is really important. A, because I think it helps you, like, laughing is just good for people's moods in general. But B, I think it creates some of the intimacy, but it also helps you not take things too seriously. Like, you gotta enjoy life. And I mean, maybe I like this one because I make a lot of bad jokes that I think are great, but you know, maybe that's just me.
Yeah, and I definitely think, like, we both have like a good sense of humor, and like, we don't mind like laughing at each other or like
at ourselves. Yeah.
So I definitely think, but that is important. Like, laughter, I think, is important to any relationship, and it's kind of one of those like dynamics of like friendship, and that like you want to be around people that make you laugh and like you have a good time with. And laughter is kind of an expression of a good time.
Yeah.
And that you're enjoying yourself. So.
And I appreciate that we have similar senses of humor.
Yeah.
So I think that helps. But very good. Do you want to do the next one, or do you want me
Sure.
to? Okay.
Always say goodnight and never go to sleep angry. This one comes from Rachel Killingsworth from my days at Presbyterian College. Hey, Rach, thanks for the advice. Also shared by Joyce Schmidt and Lois Wells.
Yep. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think one thing Aunt Lois put on her advice thing was, you know, no problem is too big to go to bed angry. And maybe you don't have things fully worked out yet, but even just that commitment of like, good night, love you, helps show the other person like, okay, we do have this conflict that's happening right now, but bigger than that, I love you. You know what I mean? Like, so that was great advice. Thank you.
So the next one all came from people that I know, and like, this was a very, I would say, common theme from a number of people on Facebook. Keep God first, from Gwen Benson, Denise Drummond, and Priscilla. So Priscilla, thank you for the comment. Priscilla and I went to Duke together.
Oh, nice.
She was one of the trainers for our football team.
Awesome.
So thank you for that wonderful advice, everyone. It is definitely like an important aspect, I think, of a relationship, in that like everyone's kind of on the same page, and you kind of have like your faith leading you, and that like you believe in a higher power, and you let your love and you let God's love kind of lead you. So it's a good piece of advice, and we definitely appreciate you guys sharing that with us.
Yeah, very much. Do you want me to do the next one?
Sure.
Okay, so the next one is from Zach Barrett, and he says to pick your battles. And I'm going to kind of tie this one with another one that someone on The Bachelorette, a random person I met, told me, which was to let it go. Because I think they're kind of the same, right?
Yeah.
Like, some things you just got to let go because you're picking which ones are important.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's also really a crucial piece of advice, because nobody's perfect and no two people are perfect together, right? And so there's always going to be things that aren't the way you would have done them, or there's always going to be things that you really think it would be better to, you know, but at some point, like, the other person has equal feelings, right, that are just happen to be opposite in this moment, and it doesn't matter, just let it go. There's no, so I thought that's really good advice.
Yeah, that is good advice.
So thank you.
So the next one comes from Megan Knight and Ashley Bates. So they both talked about like kind of either taking kind of a financial class or getting marriage counseling. And it's interesting, like the whole counseling situation, like I definitely see the benefit of counseling, and I like wholeheartedly I wholeheartedly support like people going to counseling, and I think it's a very good tool. I just have a hold up about it, like I don't know why, like it's just like a block.
Well, I think for you, and truly this is just a guess, I can't pretend to know what goes on up there, but I think you are a very private person, and so it's hard for you to be your vulnerable, authentic self talking about really private things to someone that you don't feel like you have that close, you know, connection with. And I definitely think that I think the main, when I heard those pieces of advice, I heard them as tools to improve communication, not necessarily as like the end all be all. Like, to me, they're a vehicle to getting to a place where you can talk about what is truly bothering you, right? Or you can be brutally honest with yourself and with your spouse about things that maybe it's been really hard for you to even find the words to say, right? Like, I know from my personal experience in like personal counseling, I wasn't in like couples counseling and anything, but that was a skill that I feel like I learned and worked on. It wasn't the only thing, but was being more honest with myself, and also working on like how I talk to myself. So I felt that one of the things I really got out of counseling was improved communication. It just so happened to be with myself. Yeah. Right? But I can imagine, and I've never been to couples counseling, so I don't really know, but from what I imagine and from things I've heard and seen, I feel like it's the people go to couples counseling because they don't feel like they're being heard. Right? Or they're not able with their spouse and the current communication abilities to get through a problem that they have. And so I see it as a means to improve communication. Yeah. And I feel the same about the financial classes, because it's like some people assume this, other people assume that, and then they're like, holy smokes, we're on different pages, right? And it's like you need to communicate about what's truly important, what's not, and sometimes you got to pick your battles. You know, so that's just where my mind went on that piece of advice. But I don't know if that's how you were thinking about it. But
no, but that brings up a good point of like the class and like counseling are vehicles to like improve communication and make sure that like you're both on the same page, which is a critical part of being married. Making sure that you're both on the same page.
Yeah, and I feel like at least part of your hesitancy is if there was something truly bothering you, like 10 out of 10 would take every bet being like, he's going to feel way more comfortable telling it to me than to a stranger.
Yeah.
Right? That, like, or maybe the person's not a stranger because we've had 10 sessions for an hour, but, like, they're still much more a stranger than, you know? So, like, I just feel that it's...
Well, and it also kind of goes with the, like, keep your business, like,
yourself,
out of the streets. So, like, not saying that, like, a therapist is the streets, but, like, there are more streets than the house.
Yeah, well, I also feel like you have much more mature communication skills than a lot of people, in my opinion. But I also feel like if you felt like it was a last resort and you absolutely needed to, you would go. It might not be comfortable, it might not be your first choice, but I feel like you wouldn't be opposed to trying if you felt like you've exhausted lots of other options.
Yeah, if you felt like we needed to do it, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
If you felt like it was something we needed to do, I would do it for you.
What a nice guy. I won't put you through that. At least not the first year. No, I'm kidding. But I think that is good advice. Like, another part of that is seek help when you need it. Right? If you're trying something and it's not working, seek help. Right? Ask for the help that you need. So I think that's another kind of aspect of that piece of advice. So the next one, I'll do the next one. This comes from my mom, and it also comes from another one of my best friends, Holly Nichols. My mom says to treat it like it's a partnership and share the decisions, because it is. You know, it's not king and serfs, you know, and it's not princess and, you know, servant. Like, it's a partnership, and Holly says, remember that you're on the same team, right? It's not two people against each other. We're, you know,
trying to go for the same. We're on the same ship here.
Same goals, yeah. And so I think that is really important, because I know that it can be really hard if one person feels like their values and goals aren't being worked towards.
Yeah.
Right? And I think, again, that kind of comes down to communication. You can't really share decisions if you're not communicating about them.
Or if you're not seeking their like input.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I'm gonna
do this.
They don't care. They could care less about this, so I'm just gonna do that. That's something that like I definitely think you do a very good job of. There are a lot of things that I'm like, you could have just made this decision, but you do run things by me, and make sure that like it is something that like
I at least give you the option to give input. Yeah.
And that's something that like it's important to do. Like, it shows me that like you value my opinion on things.
I do. And actually, it's funny that you mentioned that, because it's funny that you say that I do a good job with that, because I feel like in this wedding planning situation, there's been many times that I've just been like, oh, well, we'll just do this, it'll be fine. And someone of it's never like the same person, I don't want to make it seem that way, but like, depending on what it is, like some random person will be like, well, absolutely not, like I have strong feelings this other way. And I'm like, holy smokes, I had no idea. Like, glad you said that, because otherwise we were going to be doing something totally different, right? So I think that just shows the value of, you might assume that nobody cares, or like, you know,
somebody could have strong opinions.
Somebody could have strong opinions and you're just not aware. So I'm actually grateful that people in our family are pretty vocal about their wants and needs, and they let me know that they have opinions.
So the next one is from Sarah Cutcliffe, my future sister-in-law and Hattie's current sister-in-law. Yeah. Find the joy in the small moments together. I think that's kind of like just a mantra for life, but also a mantra can be for our relationships. Finding the joy in the moments that we're together and being happy with each other.
Yeah. Well, and I think also she makes a good point, because it's not weddings all the time, vacations all the time. Like, there's a lot of in the trenches, hard work going on, bone tired, and some of that's not going to be fun. Like, it's not going to be fun getting 2 hours of sleep and cleaning up baby poop all the time, but there is going to be small moments of joy even in the hard times. And so I think that is really good. So thank you, Sarah. So I'll do the next one. It's actually by Sarah's mom, Cindy Olson. And she says, always fight with your spouse when he's not home with you and you're alone. And she actually wrote this big long thing. I thought it was pretty funny. And she's like, there's several reasons for this. The first is, you always win. The second is, you can say everything you want to say. But most importantly, if it's a really big issue, you can, get all your feelings out ahead of time by yourself. All the things that you couldn't take back, you've said to the wall, right? And so at the time when you're really ready to talk about it with your spouse, you can be much more calm and get through it. But I thought that was a good piece of advice, because sometimes you are just overcome with emotion. Mm-hmm. But I definitely feel that you can apologize as many times as you want, but things are hurtful, right? And so to try to minimize, like, nobody's perfect, but to try to minimize that, often you don't mean those hurtful things. It's just an in the moment.
Yeah.
And so if you can just minimize that, that's just making things easier on everybody. So, and also this is one I like because it's something I feel like I can work on. I know that when we do have disagreements, or if I feel like I've hurt your feelings, or if you've hurt my feelings, I want to immediately talk it out and get to a resolution. I'm like, if it takes 2 hours, we're sitting down, we're talking this out, and you're like, I need space, I need time,
yes.
I'm done with this, like, we need to cool down, right? And so I think there's a lot of wisdom and value in being like, let's take a breather here and address this in a little bit, but it's so against my core mode of operating.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I just want to get to the solution right now. I feel so bad about this. Like, I don't want to sit with this painful feeling. I want to just get to it being better. Mm. So yeah, my strategy might not be the best. But anyway, so that stuck out to me because I have already felt it was something I can work on. So anyway, thank you, Cindy.
Yeah, and it's funny, I think about that, and it definitely makes me think of kind of think about things before you get into a heated conversation, and process it. I'm definitely a process person where I want to think on it, and I can get back to you. Mm-hmm. So definitely fighting when you're alone gives you time to process things,
right.
And not be in.
You can say all those really good snarky comments, and no one's feelings are gonna get hurt.
So the next one is from my future brother-in-law and Sarah Cutcliffe's husband, Rob Cutcliffe. Oh, it's also your brother, right? Yeah. Show love in the ways you naturally do as much as possible, but occasionally show loves in the way that you naturally that they naturally do too. Oh, so show love the way that I naturally do, but also be aware of the way that you naturally like to be loved on, and make sure that I express love to you the way you want to be shown love.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be all the time, right? Don't change yourself, but it's just one of those
take a moment and think about how your partner, how they want to be loved. It may not be the way that you want to be loved.
Right.
And so can you take a moment and do something for your partner to bring them a little bit more joy than just doing something that maybe you like. Mm-hmm. So it's very good, very good advice.
All right, so the next one also comes from Holly Nichols, and someone said this on the hike, and Holly wrote it, and she even wrote I agree with that person on the hike. But the advice is, it's better to be kind than to be right. And I think that is excellent advice. And I think it picks up on a lot of things we've talked about before, you know, like pick your battles or fight when you're alone, right? You don't want to say those mean, snarky things that aren't really what you have in your heart, right? Like, and at the end of the day, maybe the dishwasher was loaded the wrong way, or maybe you made this really bad investment, but like, if you're kind and loving with each other, that's gonna last. Whereas if you're
always just want to be right, then
and that's another thing that I'm like, we talk about it in my family a lot, of like the Cutcliffe school of like, what is it, judgment, and what did Uncle Blake say when we came for at my dissertation defense? We have a lot of big feelings, and
you guys like that. You're very competitive when you guys.
And we like to be right. Yeah. Like we all like to be right, but very often we're all coming at things from different angles, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like our whole family could benefit from. Because sometimes, I don't say we're ever like intentionally trying to be mean to each other, but I feel like sometimes it gets heated when it doesn't need to be, and people's feelings get hurt when it's certainly, like it'll be about something that has nothing to do with us personally in any way, but suddenly it's like,
I'm right and you're wrong.
Because we all really like,
believe strongly how you
believe
feel.
strongly, yes, and believe we have good logic to back it up, and who wouldn't agree with this logic, right? So anyway, I think that was not only good advice for everyone, but good advice for me personally and my family personally, just because I've been on both sides of that, right? Like I know that that's how I naturally like to be, but I also have been in many conversations where it's the receiving end of that, and it's not a great feeling at times. So, and like, I wouldn't want to put someone that I love, like, through that. Like, why would I want to do that? But so anyway, lots of good advice.
So that is kind of like, there is one piece of advice that I got that actually came on my bachelor party from Tyler Robinson, and he was just like, always remember, which is getting harder and harder to do with the two of us, because I feel like with every day that passes, we become a little bit more like each other than the day before.
We really do.
But he was just like, always remember that like you two are like completely separate people with like completely different like backgrounds, and like your way of processing things, your way of seeing things, like there may be some commonality, but like you're always going to be two different people.
Yeah, you're two distinct individuals.
Yeah, and so you gotta like always keep that in the back of your mind, and like still love on each other, but like don't get so caught up in not just being right, but like don't get so caught up in like we have to think the same way. But hopefully, like we share a lot of the same like values and stuff. Yeah. But we don't think the same way. We're not going to think the same way. So don't like put the pressure on the relationship to have that.
Right, to force it every time. Yeah. That's interesting.
And so that was a good piece of advice from Tyler. Another piece of advice I think is like, this may sound crazy. This actually came from, we were having dinner in Florida, and this came from...
Was this on your bachelor party?
Yeah. This came from, well, this is before like the bachelor party really got started. We were just...
But it was that same trip. Yeah.
Andy Bickford, which I think like very much applies to like a Florida piece of advice. He was like, just always remember that like everything you do is a reflection of your wife and your marriage.
I thought you were going to say everything you do can be held against you in a court of law, because he's a lawyer, so like that's what I thought he was going to say.
I mean, that could be something that a lawyer would say, and something that would very much apply to being in Florida. But no, he's just like, everything you do is kind of a reflection of like your wife and like your relationship. So always have that kind of like, at least in the back of your mind, that like everything that you do is just a reflection of your relationship and the love that we have. So
Aw,
it was a
that
good,
is good. I like
good little message. Appreciate that.
I told you about the guy, I think I mentioned it, the guy I was sitting next to on the plane was a piece of work. So the guy on one side was an older gentleman, probably in his late 70s, early 80s, like hair fully white, like not even some gray, like full every single strand. Not that that's, I'm just trying to, you know, he's an older and he was talking about like, oh, he moved to, you know, Phoenix in the 60s or whatever, like he was alive in the 60s and old enough to move there, so he's older. Anyway, I'm digging myself in the hole. The guy on the other side had just been married since March.
Okay.
And so I was asking, you know, hey, do you have any advice? And the one guy was like, well, I've barely been married, so I don't know that I can give you much advice. And the other guy was like, well, let me give advice to both of you. Don't leave the bedroom. Like, that was what he said.
Don't leave the bedroom.
Yeah.
I
like,
mean, if
right.
you don't ever leave the bedroom, you can't have all these outside influences. Like, it's just the two of you.
Well, yeah, and then, yeah, so anyway, there's more I should tell you, but maybe not on the podcast.
And so the
Things
older
I did
guy
not
was a piece
expect
of
to
work.
hear out of people's mouths.
On a plane.
Yes. So anyway, it was entertaining, but we're very appreciative for all of the thoughtful and heartfelt advice from people, and I'm sure we'll get more as time goes on and learn more things, but
And who knows, one day we'll be giving other people advice.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah. That is what we are doing.
Yeah. We're gonna get married.
We are
I'm
4 weeks
excited.
away.
I can't believe it.
Deuces.